that ASEAN may have wittingly, or perhaps unwittingly, or half-wittedly, moved from a theory of non-interference to constructive engagement. And I think he's played that role very well in being a professor, not an activist, but looking deeply at the theories that may underlie some of this practice, or at least theories that should be extracted from this practice. The two panelists we have, I hope, will actually give us quite a different insight. The first is a good friend, Bella Marthi, who is presently a visiting fellow with the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies. Though since she's Singaporean, I'm not sure where she's visiting from. I think her home. What I think is real is that Bremna's background is much more as a social activist. She has been president of AWARE, she's been involved in migrant worker issues in Singapore, she has been for one term a nominated member of parliament, and I think she will go back from ISIS to some sort of work and gives us some time to do activist work again. And the other panelists, and I remember his name is Mark, and I'm so old I'm losing my mind and my notes. Mark Moon, is a student activist from Myanmar, all of 22, which makes even Chin Ling look old.
I've just sat there and listened to the address, quite mesmerized by the whole discussion, because I think you have really opened up many windows in this discussion, and I'm thinking I've attended quite a number of discussions on Myanmar, and it's a pity that this level of discussion is not appearing fast enough on both the regional and I think to a certain extent even the international plane, so that we can really engage in some of the thoughts that you have put forward. So thank you very much for getting me excited on this whole issue, because it does seem very, very bleak how to address the Myanmar issue. What I had sort of discussed, or what the organizers had discussed with me, was to perhaps, just in case audience are not really totally in sync with what is happening in Myanmar in terms of from the social perspective. So if you already know it, please bear with me, and it is also quite ridiculous for me to be talking when we have someone who is actually from Myanmar. So what I would just like to take one through before coming back to engage on the topic itself would be, I think, this comes from websites as well as discussions with NGOs that are primarily working outside of Myanmar, based in Thailand. A few of them, some at the border, that deal with a lot of internally displaced folks, the refugees and the indigenous groups. So that's a few NGOs at the borders, and another one based in Bangkok, whose primary aim is to just focus on getting some rights back to the people of Myanmar. From those discussions, putting it slightly together, the World Bank and IMF situation actually shows that Myanmar's GDP in 2006 was 8.69 trillion US dollars, doubling from the 1996 figures. When that is the GDP and you contrast that to what is really happening in the country, from statistics that also come from reliable United Nations, international NGOs that are working within Myanmar, you have figures of 58% of the children are underweight. It's not really clear what is the reference line here for underweight, but we also don't have to badger away at that point, because we do know, we have seen enough to know that really the issue of starvation and deaths of children is quite rampant in, especially in the rural parts of Myanmar or Burma. That alone is also problematic. When is Myanmar Burma and when is Burma Myanmar, which is also a political issue. And in spite of the amount of money that is actually available to the people, it seems to be parked in the selected few. And there was one video that we saw in the recent civil society conference. I do not know the authenticity of this video, but it was about the daughter of the junta leader who got married and how much of jewelry she received. And it is again very clear, that whole circuit around the family, that you have to favors beget favors, and the buy-in, there's a whole community around the leadership that are all clearly bought into this system of keeping themselves going and amassing wealth for themselves. So if this is the situation, and I do not wish to belabor the point, on one hand there are there's natural wealth. It is parked with a few people, and on the other hand, there is a whole deprivation for a whole community in Myanmar, Burma, and a whole lot that live outside as diaspora, and another whole lot that live in a bad situation of being a refugee, or depending which camp, which NGO you are with, or it does come to Singapore too, in case we think it is all up there and beyond us. Because I work with Transient Workers Count too, we do know that some of the Myanmar workers were hauled in by our own CID for questioning. And the intimidation, rightfully or wrongfully, no one will ever know, but how do we moderate with the people here? And when someone is an undocumented worker in Singapore, the person is sent to jail and then sent home. What if that individual is actually someone who is actually in another context might be an asylum seeker? So with that backdrop, I would now like to quickly go back to what we have discussed on collective engagement and... Oh, is that right? Okay, very quickly. Collective engagement and constructive engagement and collective revulsion. I have a slight. I think I would like to take a slightly different track, not totally different, but just to tease it a bit more. That I don't even believe that the ASEAN approach in the first place had been one of constructive engagement. Even within ASEAN, or where in this special case Myanmar is concerned, ASEAN is 40 years old, and we have quite a number of issues within ASEAN where we have 116 million people out of the 550 who live below the poverty line. So what then is constructive engagement in terms of ASEAN, in terms of a rights-based approach? So but where I do agree, because of that whole fallacy of thought or an ideology, which is too strong a word here, in terms of constructive engagement, it wasn't really strong in the first place. Then for us to transit, for ASEAN to transit into a better bargaining position, especially where rightly put, where sanctions are concerned, you have no base to really ask for sanctions or impose sanctions, because one has never really been strong in the first place to engage. So that is my one further addition I would like to have. And to all the ideas that you have put forward, I totally agree. To the idea of us sending our envoy, I think it is wonderful, rather than having a UN Ibrahim Gambari trying so hard. And I do think that perhaps for discussion, we could look at whether Indonesia or Singapore needs to play a bigger role here. So while the speaker has talked about two actors, Myanmar and ASEAN, I would like to put forward the third actor, Singapore as chair. What kind of a pivotal role are we going to play in transiting or deepening this whole engagement and bringing it to the real level of what we understand by constructive engagement? With that, we will wait for discussions here.